Welcome to episode 10 of Media Conversations with Malik Cooper. I'm your host, Malik Cooper, and today I'm joined by the shot clock operator for the Chicago Bulls G League affiliate, William Downing. Mr. Downing is a veteran of the U.S. Navy, a play-by-play announcer, a color analyst, and overall just a guy from Chicago who loves sports just like I do. On this episode, we'll cover his unique path to the Windy City Bulls from the U.S. Navy and his maturation as a play-by-play announcer throughout his career. But first, let's start with a lighthearted conversation we had as two men who love NBA basketball. One of the only really embarrassing moments I can remember from my childhood is I was born in 2002. So I was like 12 at the time, too old for this to be happening. I was like 12 years old. I was in middle school. And I can remember crying when Rajon Rondo got traded because, the end of the Big Three era, Paul Pierce getting old, Ray Allen left us to go to Miami, Kevin Garnett's getting old. Then we trade both of them. So Rondo is all I have. Rondo is all I have. And then they trade him. I was like, we're going to stink. Oh, I cried when he got traded. That was terrible.
Chicago. And then I think he went to the Lakers after that.
Rondo. He bounced around. I remember I think he went to Dallas. I know he was with y'all. He led the league in assists with the Kings once. Yeah, he was with LA when they won in the bubble. He's been knocking around.
Yeah, definitely a good player. I tell you, when they had Pierce and Garnett and them on that team, they were unstoppable.
Yeah. I hate that Kendrick Perkins got. Obviously, I was like 8 years old at the time. It was right after that when I started watching basketball. But just being a historian, I hate that Kendrick Perkins got hurt in I think it was Game 6 of 2010 Finals, because I feel like we could have had 2 rings instead of just 1. But injuries are all part of sports.
Agreed. Yeah, that brought back the heydays of the Celtics back in the days when one of my favorite players, Dennis Johnson, was playing for him. So, I mean, that was back there with who was it? Larry Bird, Dennis Johnson, McHale,
Parrish,
Larry Parrish. I mean, just those guys were just so good.
Yeah. You graduated in 87, right?
Yep.
So you grew up watching that team, basically. Was that like a secondary favorite team of yours?
Especially because they always showed the Lakers Celtics games.
Right.
That was like the best. Yeah, absolutely. And I was just like, wow, I'm watching all these people. I mean, there's 10 great players that are Hall of Famers on the court at one time, and then they had 2 benches full of potential Hall of Famers. That's how good those teams were.
I did not realize how deep the Lakers bench was until I got older. I didn't know who Jamal Wilkes was. I didn't know Michael Thompson was a former number 1 overall pick. Didn't know Norm Nixon wasn't there for the entire time, but he was there when they first got there. You had I didn't know Bob McAdoo was coming off the bench like that. They were stacked. And Bill Walton coming off the bench.
There was only like 4 real teams in that league that were absolutely stacked. I mean, you had teams like the Jazz that had 2 good players. You had Dallas, they had a couple good players, but the Lakers, Bulls, Celtics, Knicks, and what was the other one? Sixers were pretty good back then too. But I mean, there was like 5 powerful teams that nobody messed with.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I was just recently looking at the all-time scoring list, and I had to remember that Dr. J was in the ABA because I was like, why is Dr. J not like top 70 on the all-time scoring list? But that's why. Him, Moses, didn't know much about Moses. Moses isn't talked about as much as I feel like he should be, to have like 3 MVPs.
No, and he helped Julius Erving win that title. Moses Malone was the big man in the middle.
Yeah. What do you have any thoughts about? Do you watch Inside the NBA?
Do I watch Access NBA? I don't. I just watch the pregame, whatever's on, and then the game.
Okay, I was just wondering if you had any comments on how Charles Barkley called Kevin Durant a bus rider recently, and then Kevin Durant in turn retaliated by posting Charles Barkley when he was with the Rockets, you know, a picture of him with Scottie Pippen and Hakeem Olajuwon, and a picture with him. I think it was him, Dr. J, Moses, and maybe Maurice Cheeks, but basically saying you can't call me a bus rider.
Exactly. And I what I get about Charles is I think he's more entertainment on that show. He's very knowledgeable, don't get me wrong, but I think he's more of an entertainment value for that show. I believe that's the TNT show you're talking about. I have seen it a couple times, and you know, him and Shaq, they go back and forth at each other, and I don't know. I just Barkley is kind of he's a funny character to me. He's so knowledgeable, but then he says some things right off, you know, the tongue that you're just like, wow, I can't believe you say that, you know, and knowing in this day and age of social media what the backlash is going to be. And it was almost instant, if I remember right, the reply that who was that he was talking about? Was it Garnett, you said? Yeah. Right. How he replied, basically, he was watching, he's like, oh, really? You know, and then it's the biggest thing in sports because those two are sparring against each other. But, you know, Barkley, he shopped around. He was on many teams. I mean, Pippen, people think he was just with the Bulls. He wasn't, you know. It's just sometimes I wonder, sometimes I think those guys get a little too big for their britches and they say some things that they wish they didn't. And unfortunately, millions and millions of people are watching it, and it ends up into what we saw.
Yeah.
But he's funny.
Yeah, it is a lot for entertainment, like you said. My personal thoughts on Inside the NBA are, I love Ernie. Ernie is one of the best hosts. You can't really go wrong there. Shaq, in my personal opinion, he isn't going to tell me anything that I don't already know as far as watching the game. Like, oh, Brandon Ingram, he played like a superstar tonight. He said, give me the ball and get out of the way, and that's why the Pelicans won. Okay. That's cool. Exactly. Then we got Charles. You just perfectly encapsulated Charles. He's going to say something for shock value. He's going to do his little guarantees, and they're going to be wrong 80% every time. And then Kenny is actually going to give you some analysis. So I'm cool with Kenny, but I don't know. It's just not as, I guess you could say, entertaining as I prefer. Kenny's cool. I like Kenny. I don't want to sound like I hate the show because they do a good job and it's an entertaining product. I like Kenny, but yeah,
oh yeah.
For those people who say it's just,
he's kind of the odd man out, you know. He seems like he's he's the odd man out.
Exactly.
You know, it's like everybody's there, they're talking, doing their little bit, and then he comes on and says, well, let's break this down. And, you know, Charles like, come on, man. Let's get back to what, you know, people like. But, I mean, he's knowledgeable. Guys, I mean, Kenny is just, he tries to keep a straight face, and they try to keep the camera on him as much as they can when those two, you know, Shaq and Barkley are going at it. I just wish they would show more of him because, you know, he's got to be just dying on that stage.
Oh, yeah. There's no way you're not.
Those two are just, it's got to be great to watch.
Even going back to the whole bus driver thing, once again, like you said, with him being the odd man out, it was just Shaq and Charles going back and forth like, oh, you know, if you're a superstar in this league, and Chuck is like, thank you, Shaq, thank you. That's just always how it goes because Kenny doesn't have the perspective of being a superstar player, and I feel like that's where most of their content comes from. That's one thing where they do get deeper level on is when they talk about how it is to be a leader of a team. Like when they're criticizing Joel Embiid for not dominating on a nightly basis, or Nikola Jokic for not exploiting Draymond in the paint because they're like, oh yeah, you're half a foot taller than him. How are you not exploiting him in the paint? That's where I can like appreciate their insight. But even then, like you said, you're leaving Kenny out because he does not have the perspective of leading a team.
Right. Correct. And I think that makes for some good TV, you know, like on certain movies, you put certain actors together, it makes good drama. I think he kind of plays, you know, he's like, you know, they always say 2 is perfect, 3 is a crowd. You know, he's kind of that kid that I remember back in the days that, hey, I want to play, you know, and he ends up in a little bit of knowledge, and these two are kind of looking at each other like, really? But I mean, it works. It works. And that's the weird part. It works. That
it does.
Those 4 are four totally different personalities, but yet it works some way, and that is one of the best rated pregame and postgame and halftime shows in the NBA.
Yeah. If nothing else, they're authentic, and I think that's what people appreciate.
I agree.
Yeah. To actually get into you're from Chicago, like you said. We all know that. You grew up watching the Bulls and loving the Bulls and appreciating that historic run the Jordan Bulls went on, and now you work for the Bulls. And I remember you telling me off the air about how you saved your first check because it said written on it that you got a check from the Chicago Bulls. So can you once again retake me through that moment, what that meant to you, and what it's like even now just knowing that you work for the Chicago Bulls?
Well, back in the days when Jordan was new, especially out of North Carolina, and the team wasn't doing very well, the hype was already there. And it took a couple seasons for him to get his feet wet and really take over. He took over, don't get me wrong, he took over right away, but he needed some pieces around him to make that takeover start working. And I tell you, I remember seeing him in person at the old stadium, watching him on TV, and actually just thinking, wow, this guy, was picked number one. And the way that the Bulls got him was very, was interesting, because that year, the Portland Trailblazers had the number one pick, and they went with Sam Bowie instead of Michael Jordan.
Mistake.
And then Michael Jordan went number 2 to the Bulls, and the rest is history. And I got to see that in person, and like you mentioned, actually working for the Chicago Bulls organization and doing the shot clock for the Windy City Bulls and seeing a lot of these up and coming stars, and saving that first check stub. It actually has the red Chicago Bulls emblem on it, and it says, Madison Street. And I'm just like, my gosh, this is really cool. I made it, even though I'm not doing exactly what I love, because I like play-by-play, but being there and being part of that team, and knowing that, I'm kind of living a dream that a lot of people in life wish that they could do. I mean, they go to games, they pay for tickets and all that stuff, and that's fine. And I'm one of those guys still too. But to have the opportunity to do the shot clock and see these up and coming stars, and especially when the NBA players get hurt, they come to Windy City to rehab, so we get to see these guys, up close, and it's just like, man, it's that guy right there. He's making $47 million, and he sat there and had a conversation with me. I mean, that's crazy. And then 3 days later, after he rehabs, he's scoring 40 points on TNT. I mean, it's a kind of, pinch me if this is real type of opportunity. And, it is a dream, but it's reality, and anybody can do it. You gotta make your connections, utilize your resources, and kind of be at the right place at the right time.
You said something interesting there about how the NBA stars come to the Windy City Bulls, the Chicago Bulls, that is. They go to the affiliate to rehab before they go back to the team. What interactions can you tell me about where you've talked to Zach LaVine or DeMar DeRozan or Vooch or any of the players for the Chicago Bulls just coming down to Windy City to rehab?
Well, we don't get really a really good opportunity to conversate with the actual NBA players, because before anybody even comes into the arena, before we even get there, they have their practice and all that stuff. They're kind of shielded away from, the regular day fans, like myself and yourself. We don't get to see that, even though I get there 2 hours early. They're already done in the locker room, getting taped up, and but when they do come down, when they come to the bench, and they'll sit there and they'll talk to you as they're coming in to check in. It's just like, wow, how you doing? You want to be really professional. How you doing, Mr. LaVine? And you're like, oh my God, I said Mr. It's really Zach. And we're right there with these guys, and it's kind of neat to be able to see the up and coming stars, because you get to watch them as they grow. I was talking about you, I believe off the air, we were talking about Ryan Arcidiacono, and I saw him when he was with the Windy City Bulls very first season, and I'm just like, man, this guy's name sounds familiar. So I went back and I looked. I'm like, oh my God, he's the guy that gave up the final shot to win the national championship. So I talked to him, and sometimes it was almost like we were like brothers. It was crazy, we'd just sit there, just like we're on a front porch drinking lemonade, and we're talking, and I'm just like, my God, this guy is, I remember watching him on TV, and and now he's in the NBA doing what he does, and I can say, man, I talked to that guy, and some people may think, well, that's really no big deal, but for me, growing up a sports fan, I that's something that nobody will be able to take away from me.
Absolutely. As a sports fan myself, I would love the opportunity to have experiences like that. I know Ryan Arcidiacono. We went to Villanova. He's definitely an exceptional talent to be playing in the G League, and he was also with my favorite team, the Boston Celtics, for a minute, and was at the end of our rotation for a minute. You've been with the Windy City Bulls since 2016, since they became an organization. You've built up a lot of equity within that organization, and that was culminated with the awards you received from them. So why don't you tell us a bit about how you received that award and what it meant to you?
Well, when they first came out, there was talk about the Chicago Bulls getting at that time it was the NBA D League, and now they call it the G League because, of course, Gatorade and so forth. But they had the opening of what at the time was the Sears Center, and they had this intro, and it was really neat. We're like, wow, this is pretty cool. I was at the Illinois Media School, and my instructor said, so what would you guys think if we kind of did all the production for the Windy City Bulls? And I'm like, let's do it. I mean, why are we even talking? Let's hit the road and get out there. And we laid the cable, we put the cameras up, we set up all the tables. We were the guys that did all the grunt work, and then we had to work the games, and then when it was over, we had to tear everything down. So I mean, we really got force fed what it's really like to be in sports, starting from the bottom up. And one year there was an award, a local hero award that people can nominate you for, and I got nominated for a lot of the volunteer work that I do, with veterans and Special Olympics and so forth, and it was an honor. I mean, to be out there, to be honest with you, I was scared. I'm like, wow, what am I doing? I'm sitting in front of these thousands of people, and I'm being honored. And there's probably thousands of people out there that deserve this award more than me. And I was very humble. It was neat. I was out there with, nurses and just people that really epitomize what it's really like to be a hero. And that was pretty neat to be honored like that in front of the Windy City Bulls fans and my peers that I work with on the table.
You said that award was connected to your work with veterans and things of the like. You, of course, yourself are a veteran, and that brings me to your unique path to get into the broadcasting industry. So let's take it back a bit to your graduation from high school and kind of chronologically go through how you got to the Windy City Bulls.
Well, I graduated from the western suburbs of Downers Grove in 1987. I graduated in June. 7 days later, I went into boot camp in San Diego in the Navy. And I graduated late August from boot camp, and then went right across the river to the Naval Training Center to become a radioman, which is basically communications on board a ship or shore duty or wherever they put you. They basically, you go wherever the Navy tells you to. And I was sent to a Spruance class destroyer out of Charleston, South Carolina, called the USS Deo. And I learned how to do Morse code. I was a teletype repairman. I did a lot of crypto tech type work with, top secret material and stuff. There I was, an 18, 19-year-old kid that, have national security things right in my fingertips. And it was a lot of responsibility. And I grew up pretty quick. We deployed several times down into the Caribbean doing what they call LEO ops, which is law enforcement operations, with the Coast Guard for drug trafficking. We were in the Mediterranean, we were in the Indian Ocean, we were in the Persian Gulf for Operation Desert Storm. And I got to see the world pretty much force-fed. And I tell you, if you don't have a path like I did, and nothing against my parents, it was hard for them to afford to send me to college. So I went into the military like my dad and my grandpa and my cousins. And it's almost like I needed it, like a swift kick right in the backside. It really woke me up, it's time to grow up. It's time to really take on the responsibility of being a man. And so I did that. And then after I got out, I got into the Department of Defense, into the law enforcement up in Great Lakes Naval Base. And then I moved to Michigan and got into the Michigan Department of Corrections as a corrections officer. Then I made it into sergeant, and I worked as a team leader for the emergency response team with different aspects of it's almost like a SWAT team for the corrections is what I did for quite a few years as a sergeant. And unfortunately for me, I got injured in an uprising, a small uprising at the prison, and ended up having to have double back fusion surgery, right shoulder surgery, left knee reconstruction. And it was a very humbling experience to go from talking to my buddies like, hey, how you doing, to, being in a hospital and not knowing what the heck was going to happen next. But that weird turn of events, believe it or not, got me into sports, because while I was rehabbing, going through physical therapy and hoping that this pain would go away, I heard in a commercial on the radio, hey, you want to get into sports? This is the way to do it. You want to be a board op? You come here. And I'm like, man, I want to get into sports, because that fits right into my limitations, not really lifting very heavy and stuff. And I can sit down and I can stand up if I need to. So I'm like, wow, that works well with my restrictions. So I got into board opping. I was doing like NASCAR, Michigan State, local high school basketball and football. And the gentleman that was running the actual football and basketball for the local high school, he retired. And they were just like, hey, you like sports? You've been, busting your backside for us. We're going to give you a chance. So I got into doing play-by-play for the Ludington Orioles in Ludington, Michigan. And, I was really, things were going really, really well. And I'm like, man, I really want to take this to the next level. So I went to Illinois Media School down here in Chicago, and I graduated top of my class. I was never late. I never was sick for the entire, I didn't miss a thing. And if they asked me to give 100%, I gave them 10,000, just because I knew that I was much older than everybody else in my class. I'm in my low 50s, and a lot of these kids were 23 to about 29 years old. And, young kids really with the deep, running passion of, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there. And I knew that I had to battle my age. I had to battle, some really great talent. But I was supposed to be doing play-by-play for Windy City. Well, that fell through. And so I was working as a cameraman and, laying wire and stuff. And the weird thing that happened was a gentleman named Mark Grossman, heard me, and he goes, well, what would you think about doing shot clock for me? And I'm like, I have no idea. And I think I was more shocked than anything. I was like, what is the shot clock? And I knew what it was, but I was just like, what's he talking? Am I going to get a chance? And he says, I need you to do this, take a test. You actually take a test, and then you have to get cleared by the NBA. They do background checks, they do everything on you. So my first year, my first game, I was pretty much terrified and, made a couple mistakes. And, but, they were just like, you did pretty good for the first time. And I continued to do it the rest of the year. So basically like an internship, I didn't get paid for it. And the next year, he offered me a permanent job with him, doing Windy City. I do UIC Flames, Roosevelt University. I've done Robert Morris. I've done a lot of high school. I mean, it's just being at the right place at the right time, and even taking like a situation of me not being the play-by-play guy to take advantage of this situation really has flourished into a pretty smart decision on my part, because I didn't think it was at the time. But I mean, now with the people I get to meet and and be right there, I'm literally within an arm's length of some of the greatest soon-to-be NBA players in the world. So it's that's kind of how my path, as weird as it goes, it's kind of like a Richter scale where line goes up and goes down. That's how my career started. But I'm happy where I'm at, but I'd like to do more. But I'm comfortable knowing that I've made what I have, the dent that I've done. I'm going to turn 53 years old, so it's like, well, most people are thinking about retirement. I'm thinking about just going full throttle and whatever else I can do.
You talked a lot about the path being important, needing a path and a direction, and how the Navy sort of did that for you. And what I was thinking about as I heard that was how you went into communications even within the Navy. And obviously you're a huge sports fan. So I was just wondering if you knew at the time that you did want to do sports one day, and just were not like, you didn't have the means, obviously, like throughout college and all that, to do so.
Well, I can tell you, my Navy recruiter, I think he fibbed a little bit to get me into the Navy, because he asked me what my passion was. I said, I love sports. He goes, I got just the thing. It's called communications. You'd be a radio man. I'm like, radio man. I'm like, oh, wow. I'm going to be able to be, on the radio and do sports broadcasting. Well, that's not what it was.
Not quite that simple.
Yeah, it wasn't that simple. I mean, there's a lot of steps to get where I was. But I mean, even as to be a radioman, you start off on the bottom and you work your way up, and there was a lot to learn. And just like in sports, a good friend of mine, Gary Griffiths, he always, when I worked with him in 2018, he even says that the day that I stop learning is the day that I should walk away from sports, because you learn every day. And he's a consummate professional, and he listens to my broadcast, I listen to his, and we kind of critique each other. And it's just like, how do I critique a guy that has been doing this for so long and is so good at it? But he even says, hey, I'm still learning. There's things I learn every day. No day is ever the same. So that's the one thing I use as kind of a guide for me, is to, hey, I'm still learning. And I do, whether it's just like a 30-second block that I learned something different, I'm still learning something, and I've learned from some really good people. And, Gary's a great guy. As you've talked to him before, and just a great teacher, just a great person that, he'll give you the time to talk and critique and tell you how to get better, in his opinion, and then he'll turn around and say, hey, you got to do whatever you think is right, and put your own spin on it. You can take what I can give you and take it or not. But I take a little bit from everybody that I talk to, and I kind of formed it into my way of doing things. I've got some quirky calls that I do, and, that are, I try not to be like the ESPN guys where every other word is like a catchphrase. I try to be original, try to be down home, but every so often I'll fly off with like a Chris Berman home run call or something. But, you put your own spin on it. You learn from these people, and you take a little piece of the pie every time you go, and you kind of mold that into what you want to be. And that's what makes, I think, each broadcaster, whether you're a color analyst or you're a play-by-play guy, it makes it very unique. That's why I think these teams work together very well on the radio and TV.
Mr. Downing, of course, talking about Dr. Gary Griffith, who I had on episode 8 of Media Conversations with Malik Cooper. Great guy. One of the broadcasters for the 2016 NCAA National Championship for baseball. Just a great guy all around, like you said. So I just wanted to echo that really quickly. Also, I've been framing these questions around your atypical path to where you are today. You are obviously a play-by-play man at heart, but as we've talked about at length, you got into your career at a different time than most people would. You were talking about how you were in college in your early 50s. So I wanted to ask, at what point you felt comfortable as a play-by-play man? Because obviously on the air, it's not something for everybody. It's not something that everyone can do, just being on the air, knowing you have people listening and that you don't get a redo. If you mess something up, you need to keep going.
Yeah. I know when I took over for Dominican University, they gave me a 3-game trial period. That was like January 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. And I think that was 2017, early 2018. I'm trying to remember exactly when it was, but very nervous. Tried to put my own spin on something that I don't think I was comfortable yet to do, and I made mistakes, and but I quickly learned from them. I learned what they wanted to hear, what they needed to hear, and then I kind of put my own spin on it, which made it unique. And even to this day, I've got good relationships with parents and athletes, through all the athletics that I do broadcast, and they like the fact that I'm just myself. I'm not trying to be anybody else, and I paint a really good picture of what's going on. When you're on TV, it's a different type of broadcast that you have to do. People can see what's going on, so you have to very carefully tiptoe around trying not to be a radio broadcaster, because people can't see what's on the radio. So you have to be their eyes and their ears compared to
Absolutely.
TV, where they can see what's going on, and you don't need to paint as big of a picture. And I learned that quick, because there was times where in the business they call let it breathe. Let the play breathe. You start off, all right, this guy brings the ball in, and sometimes, depending how much time's on the clock, or a big hit, a walk-off to win it all, it's all learning. And I tell you, just by listening, when I was growing up, I'm a huge Cubs fan, and I got to listen to like Jack Brickhouse on WGN, because it was one of the super stations back then. So was TBS with the Atlanta Braves. So I got to run home and watch good baseball and listen to these guys. And I'm just like, wow, someday I want to be like that. But even those guys started, Harry Carey, Jack Brickhouse, they started where I started, small town, little kid trying to make a name for himself. And, they always say, if you work hard and you form your art, it is an art, broadcasting, because, you can get on there and just like, duh, and you start getting what we call vapor locked, and you're like, oh no, now what do I do? And you forget where you're at, and you forget what's going on. And it's kind of a situation where you gotta be part of that moment, but you also have to remember where you're at, what you're doing at all times, and try not to repeat the same things over and over. It's like one of the hardest math equations, and I'm not good at math at all. That's why it made it so difficult for me. Was, okay, did I say that? What did I say? Okay, every 30 seconds you should say the score. You got all these things running through your head, but I like doing play-by-play. I do color analyst for the Joliet Slammers, so it kind of gives me a little bit of a break from being play-by-play where you have to talk so much. You become more of an analyzer, which I love baseball, so I get to work with a really good friend of mine, and you get the best of both worlds. And I've learned never to say no. If somebody calls and says, hey, is there any way you can do this game for us? Yes, I'll find a way, because it could be that one connection, Malik, that you're like, man, I really don't want to do that for $30, but that could be the one that takes you to the next level. So I've said yes to an awful lot of things. I shook my head and go, why did I do that? But I'm grateful that I did.
Right. I've wrestled back and forth with the idea of doing play-by-play myself, because I don't think that's my strong suit in the slightest, but I do think I'll eventually have to break down and say, like you said, that could be just the one break that you need to get to the next level. I personally view myself as more of a color man. I enjoy watching the play develop, like you were talking about, and then commenting on it afterwards, after the play-by-play man has sort of given his little spiel. And I find that a lot easier than having the responsibility of, painting the picture for the audience. Basically, I just feel like I can just watch, analyze, speak, and that's what it is. But so that's where my strong suit lies with it. So tell me about that a little. Are the Joliet Slammers minor league like MLB team, or is that an independent league, or what is that?
It's an independent league that is now affiliated with Major League Baseball. So last year we became affiliated, and we actually had 5 or 6 pitchers taken last year from our rotation that actually went into the minors. We had a catcher. We had a couple years back, Dietrich Enns went when we had what we called the COVID season. We had a City Challenge Cup where they had 4 teams that came in from all over the country. They put 4 teams together, managed by 4 ex-Major League Baseball players. And some of those guys got picked up, and Dietrich Enns went all the way to the Tampa Bay Rays and played with them the year that they went to the World Series, and now he's overseas. I mean, being affiliated now, a lot more opportunities to see these guys move up. And unfortunately for us, they took our best pitchers, and we did not do so well last year because they basically snagged all our really good arms. And
naturally,
when you do that, then you kind of go back into like drafting players. And it's not that those players aren't good, but they definitely weren't the talent that we had, that we lost due to being affiliated with baseball. So we had players go to the Twins. Bob Malacki was one of them. What other teams did we have? Teams like the Schaumburg Boomers, one of their pitchers went to the Milwaukee Brewers and played in the actual major leagues that season. So anything's possible with these guys.
Thank you for tuning in to episode 10 of Media Conversations with Malik Cooper. For more content from me, you can follow me on Instagram at Malik Cooper Media or on Twitter at Malik_Cooper. Once again, thank you for listening, and episode 11 will drop on June 13th.